Hello and welcome to Heroes and Patriots. Heroes and Patriots highlights issues concerning national security, intelligence, and foreign policy. Today is Thursday, August 6, 2026. We are streaming live from the studios of KMUD Community Radio in Northern California. Good morning, I'm Mary Massey, and with me is co-host John SAKOWICZ, joining us from Florida. Hello, John.
Good morning, Mary, and good morning to our audience listening in the broadcast area in Northern California and listening throughout the country and throughout the world live on the web. So happy to be doing this show with Secretary Panetta, Leon Panetta, one of my heroes. As many of our listeners know, I'm of Italian descent, and I am fiercely proud of the Secretary's career. Also want to say that his career and mine touched bases only on the farthest margins. In 1979, when I graduated Johns Hopkins from the School of Advanced International Study, and I think I've talked about this on the air, the CIA interviewed me. And Mr. Secretary, you'll get a kick out of this. So I went through the interview process and, did the questionnaire, had the polygraph, this, that, and the other thing. I ended up turning down the job, but after I was offered the job, I said to them, I can't believe that you're going to hire me. And I said, there is so much dirty laundry in my background. I started out in life as a Catholic altar boy, but, I didn't stay on that path up until this time. I said, I can't believe you hired me. And they said, Mr. Sakowicz, we hire one of two people. The vast majority of people we hire are Eagle Scouts. He says, and then there's a tiny minority of people that we hire, we call Ratso Rizzo. He said, have you seen Midnight Cowboy? I said, I have. He said, do you know who Ratso Rizzo is? I said, yeah. He was the pimp who died on the bus on the way out of town. He said, yep. He said, you're the Ratso Rizzo.
Oh, my goodness. Well, that's an interesting story, and I'm not sure if the CIA is better off for not hiring you. But anyway.
Mary, I ended up sort of working for them. And again, Mr. Secretary, you'll be interested in this. So I turned down the job, but guess who hired me? Buzzy Krongard. Buzzy Krongard hired me at Alex Brown and Sons. And it was not for anything I thought I was going to do. I ended up working for Mark Rich. This was at the end of the Iranian Revolution in 1979. And we ended up selling embargoed Iranian oil to Israel. And in exchange, via a secret pipeline, and in exchange, Mossad developed this great network of contacts in Iran. So nothing is as it appears to be in this world. And Mark Rich was not the bad guy everybody thought he was, because he ended up working with Mossad and developing this huge network of agents in Iran,
right,
and sources.
So, we typically invite listeners to call in. That number 707-923-3911. We have an abbreviated segment this first time, so Rob will be able to take one or two of the calls, and we have a lot of emails that came in prior to the show. So I just want to go ahead and get us started. In June of 2017, John and I teamed up to launch Heroes and Patriots with an eye on, national security, intelligence, and foreign policy. Now, beginning our 10th year, we continue to examine those aspects of the U.S. government, and specifically the Trump administration and the people around him, who are charged with upholding the Constitution on behalf of all American people. And I can think of no better person to help us with this, and that is Secretary Leon Panetta. He was the former Secretary of Defense. He was the 23rd, and he was unanimously accepted in. In 2010, he then established a new defense strategy and expanded service opportunities for women and women and others, regardless of race, creed, color, and gender. I think Hegseth can learn something from that. As director of the CIA, he led the operation that brought Osama bin Laden to justice back in May of 2011. So, Secretary Panetta, welcome to the program.
It's great to be with you. Any program called Heroes and Patriots is a great program to be part of. So I'm really happy to join you.
We chose that title because we wanted to talk to people who are putting their necks out, making risks. We've had whistleblowers. We had people that don't want to be quiet. And so we thought that was an apt title for the program, and I'm happy to say we're beginning our 10th year. One thing I failed to mention is your Panetta Institute, which you and your wife Sylvia started, and I want to learn more about that. It's a nonpartisan study center that seeks to inspire women and men to live lives of public service. And you have to reflect and look around us now. Being in public service is quite difficult now when you think of things. John, do you have the first question that you'd like to ask?
I have a ton of questions from people in the intelligence community and from people in Washington. First question is about your institute, Mr. Secretary, and the question is, this is on leadership and public service. Where do you think leaders are actually made? Through formal education, hands-on experience, or a combination of both? And what lessons from your career would you give young people considering public service?
Well, thank you for the question. I'm the son of Italian immigrants. My parents came here like millions of others, but they always stressed the importance of giving back to the country. And I had a chance to serve 2 years in the military, and then immediately went into public service. And I've been there for the last 50 years. I believe that it's really important for people to serve this country, to give something back to the country. And I believe that in particular for young people. And my wife and I were concerned when we came back after I was chief of staff to Bill Clinton, came back to our hometown here in Monterey. And I was teaching some classes, and I really got the sense that young people were not very committed to public service. And so my wife and I started an institute. And our primary mission is to try to inspire young people to lives of public service, because America needs that. Our democracy needs that. We've got to get young people to be interested in what our democracy is all about. And so, what we try to do is to build a new generation of leaders for our democracy. We have a number of classes we teach. We have a lecture series we provide for students as well as the community. We have a leadership program for student body officers because I figure they have some dedication to public service. We have a program that's going on right now where we get interns from all of the California State University system. They come here for 2 weeks of training, and then we send them back to the California delegation, both Democrats and Republicans, to be able to serve for 3.5 months. I also have a program called the Fellows Program, and you'll like this. It's a program with law students and with some graduate students. Mm-hmm. What I do with them is I want them to look at an issue, tell me what the Democratic position is, tell me what the Republican position is, and then tell me what a compromise would look like. By the way, that's called governing. It's a lost art these days, but we're trying to restore it.
Right.
That goes to our second question, and again, this is coming from a member of Congress. So I haven't asked anyone to sign. I haven't asked anyone to sign waivers on privacy. So you're going to know some of these people. So this is on Washington and the workings of Washington. What does Washington look from the inside, and how can an outsider better understand the realities of policymaking and political compromise?
Well, that is the nature of how our democracy is supposed to function. And our founding fathers basically created in the Constitution 3 separate but equal branches of government, each a check and balance on the other, because they did not want to reside power in any one branch of government. And the way they limited power was through checks and balances. And that's the role of the Congress. It should be a check on what happens in order to make sure that power is limited. Look, governing is not easy in a democracy. Let's just put that on the table. It's not easy. It takes the ability to listen to one another. It takes the ability to debate, to listen, to look at both sides of an issue, but then to try to develop a compromise, a consensus as to how you solve problems. That's the way it was when I was in Congress. I've said that I've seen Washington at its best, and I've seen Washington at its worst. The good news is I saw Washington work. Republicans and Democrats used to work together when I was in Congress. We worked together on legislation. We worked together on the budget. We worked together on important foreign affairs and defense matters. That was really kind of the best time in terms of really making our democracy work. And even during the Reagan administration, Democrats and Republicans came together on Social Security reform, the third rail of politics. We passed immigration reform, bipartisan vote on immigration reform. We passed tax reform, and we passed budgets where we were able to reduce the deficit. And eventually, when I was director of OMB for Bill Clinton, we passed a budget on top of one that President Bush passed, and we were able to balance the federal budget. Not only balance it, but have a surplus.
Right.
Today we're dealing with a debt of $40 trillion.
Right.
And neither party, Democrat or Republican, wants to deal with that terrible crisis that's building for the future.
Mr. Secretary, can we even balance the budget when the debt service on $40 trillion is $1 trillion a year?
It's a huge challenge right now because we have the largest debt in our history. And what we're paying in interest is becoming almost the largest item in the federal budget. It's almost $2 or $3 trillion that we're paying on interest on that debt. And the problem is that neither party has been willing to step up and implement any kind of savings. When I was in Congress, Democrats and Republicans sat down for almost 2 months at Andrews Air Force Base. We put everything on the table. We came up with $500 billion in deficit reduction, $250 billion in savings, a lot out of entitlement programs because they represent 2/3 of the federal budget. But we also raised revenues by $250 billion as well. It was a compromise, but we put it together. We passed it with a bipartisan vote. That's what needs to happen now. You need to have that kind of leadership. It's not easy. I've been there. I tell the students here at the Panetta Institute that in a democracy we govern either by leadership or by crisis. If leadership is there and willing to take risks and make tough decisions, we can avoid crisis.
So how do you see us? How do we
just finish this? If leadership is not there, we're going to govern by crisis, and that's what we've been doing for the last 20 years, frankly.
And how do we turn that around? How can that be turned around? Where does it start?
It starts with the people we elect and whether or not they have the courage to be strong leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not they put the nation ahead of party. I talked about having seen Washington at its worst. Today, unfortunately, Washington is dysfunctional. It's dysfunctional. They aren't working together. The parties are not listening to one another. They're in their trenches and throwing grenades at one another. And we pay the price for that. I'm often asked, because of having been Secretary of Defense, what's the worst threat to our national security today? And they're surprised by my answer. The worst threat is the dysfunction in Washington.
Yeah.
Because if Republicans and Democrats are not willing to work together on national security issues, on defense, and other problems facing us in a very dangerous world, then very frankly, a dysfunctional Washington is going to threaten our national security.
Mr. Secretary, I'm very impressed and moved by your focus, by the focus of the Panetta Institute on youth engagement and promoting democratic ideals. But when I look around, I see a real disconnect between our nation's youth and the political process. Young Americans are disengaged. They're engaged with their social media. They're engaged with their cell phones, and I think largely because trust has broken. How do we rebuild trust among young Americans and encourage their civic participation?
Well, I'll tell you something, and it's some people don't particularly like the idea. I do. I think we've got to get back to a national service system for young people. I think every young person should spend 2 years of service to the country, whether it's in the military, whether it's in conservation, education, healthcare. We ought to require people to spend some time giving back to the country. And then, frankly, we ought to provide a GI Bill that helps them then pay for their education rather than borrowing the money to get an education. National service is important because young people have to understand that they owe something back to the country. I was in the military during the draft. I had to serve at a time when there were young people from across the country who were part of a platoon and of a company, and they were willing to work together. They were disciplined. They gave back. They were willing to fight and die for their country. Somehow we have got to restore that kind of work ethic in young people because it's critical to our democracy.
Is anyone in Congress now talking about public service? We used to have AmeriCorps and things like that.
I don't hear it very much anymore. There is AmeriCorps. There is the Peace Corps. There are other service areas for young people. But I really think we need to combine all of that so that young people, when they get out of high school, have to serve 2 years in some capacity. And they'll learn discipline. They'll learn what duty to country is all about. They'll learn what it means to really be an American and have to deal with the problems of this country. That's what a democracy is all about. We have to do this together. We cannot do it by simply saying, we're not going to pay attention to the problems that the country is facing.
In preparing for this interview with you, Mr. Secretary, I watched a number of interviews that you did on CNN and elsewhere and read a lot about the Panetta Institute. And the word that keeps coming up is participation. Kids need to participate. Citizens need to participate. Americans need to participate. How do we get Americans to participate, particularly young Americans? Again, they seem so disengaged. Trust seems to be broken. Civic duty does not seem to be an operant concept in their minds.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of problems there. We do a poll at the Panetta Institute of young people's attitudes. And the last poll we took, they're concerned about the direction of the country. They think the country's headed in the wrong way. But most importantly, as I said, I'm the son of Italian immigrants. I used to ask my dad, why did he come all of that way to, he came from a poor area in Italy. Why did he suddenly get on a ship and travel thousands of miles to a strange land? I never forgot his answer. He said, because your mother and I believe we could give our children a better life in this country. That is the American dream. That's what we want. I've had a chance to live that dream. What I want for young people is the same ability to enjoy the American dream. Let me tell you something. These young people we're teaching at the Panetta Institute, a lot of them lack an understanding of our democracy. They lack history. They lack any kind of civil understanding of how our democracy is supposed to function. Yeah. They're not getting taught in schools. When I went to high school, I had to take a Constitution test in order to graduate. Not a bad idea to require young people to take a Constitution test in order to graduate so they understand how our democracy is supposed to work.
We are just about out of time, Secretary. I know it's gone very quickly, but are there any final thoughts or words, ways people can follow the work of the Institute, etc., before we have to say goodbye?
Well, I urge you to go online and see some of the programs that we have with our institute. But more importantly, look, I'm often asked, is our democracy going to make it? And I'm very optimistic about our democracy. Why? Because I'll tell you something. The strength of our democracy is not in Washington. It's in communities across this country of people who are willing to work together. It isn't about Democrats and Republicans. It's people who want to deal with the problems in their community. And that gives me encouragement that, whatever's happening in Washington, ultimately our democracy is going to survive, because de Tocqueville said it best of all when he came to this country. He said, America is about people who care for one another, care about their community, and are willing to work together in order to do the right thing. That's what's going to save our country.
I wish you was. I wish you were still in government, Mr. Secretary. I mean, where are the Leon Panettas today? You have a son who's a member of Congress. Why don't you talk about your son just for a moment?
Well, my wife and I are very proud. We have 3 boys, all good guys, 2 lawyers and a doctor. And the youngest, a lawyer, ran for my old seat in the Congress and won it. Jimmy's been there for almost, I guess, it'll be almost 6 or 7 or 8 years, I guess, that he's been in Congress. And look, he's there. He saw it when I was in Congress, and he saw that it was important to work together to solve issues. And he's very concerned about the dysfunction I talked about. But one thing he's trying to do is to relate to members on the other side of the aisle, to work with Republicans, to work with Democrats, to try to get something done for his district. God bless him for doing that, because he understands that going back to Washington is not just going back to pound your shoe on the table. Right. It's going back to govern.
Right.
Well, it's a credit to you and to your wife, Sylvia. I believe that all greatness, all true greatness, is intergenerational. It's legacy greatness. And it's wonderful to hear that you have a son who's in public service. Mr. Secretary, I know we agreed to 20 minutes, but this is public radio, and
we have a call, John.
We have many calls.
Yeah.
Can you take one call?
First?
Sure.
All right, caller, if you're listening, go ahead with your question.
Good morning, and thank you for having me on Heroes and Patriots Free Speech Radio. One question, Mr. Secretary Panetta. Palantir.
Sorry?
What's your question? What's your question, listener?
About Palantir's involvement in our government.
I'm not. You're breaking up. I'm not sure what you're saying.
I'm asking about Palantir.
Palantir?
Palantir?
Yes, sir. Yes.
We're not sure what that is.
Yeah. So I'm gonna try to translate this for you, Mr. Secretary. So we know that Palantir does a lot of is a major contractor with the intelligence community. Do you have any particular concerns about privacy rights as technology evolves, as AI seems to be now operating out of its sandbox? Do you have any particular concerns as a private citizen that we're not controlling the technology that seems to be evolving faster than we can keep track of?
I do worry about that. I think I'm very committed to the United States having a strong intelligence agencies that provide truth to power and the threats that exist. I think people who work in those agencies are the ones that ought to develop that intelligence. I'm not big on contractors. I think sometimes when you hire contractors, you're not quite sure just exactly what they're committed to and what they're dedicated to, and whether they're going to follow the security standards that you have to have. But I am very committed to making sure that we maintain strong intelligence agencies, because frankly, no leader, no military leader can make a decision without having good intelligence and without somebody willing to speak truth to power. You got to have somebody who has the guts and courage to speak truth to power. There's too many diversions. There's too much social media. There's too many other things going on. I see it with young people who are too devoted, frankly, to social media. What you got to do is we got to get back to basics, which is, what are the threats that we're facing? What's the truth behind those threats? And how does the United States respond?
Last question, and from my perspective, I'm a big believer in what's called human intelligence.
Yeah.
And I've worked with Nancy Pelosi for a long time. I've worked with Dianne Feinstein for a long time, particularly when she was chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. There's no substitute for boots on the ground, for operatives developing human sources, and we have such a huge investment in technology. Maybe rightfully so. Cyber warfare is going to be the new battlefield. But again, as with civic participation, it's developing the human resources that will defend our country, both in the military and in the intelligence community. What can we do to attract more young people to the intelligence community as well as to the military, leaving aside, the whole cyber battlefield, leaving aside all the technology? What can we do to develop human intelligence and human resources in the military and in intelligence?
Well, John, I agree with you on the importance of human intelligence. Sometimes human intelligence has been forgotten with all of this technology that we have, whether we're using space, whether we're using communications, whether we're using other technologies. The reality is that there is no better intelligence than human intelligence, because you have people on the ground who are looking at the threats, understand what creates that threat, and can provide much more accurate information about the nature of the threats that are there. As a matter of fact, sometimes when I was gathering intelligence, they would give me intelligence received by this kind of technology, and I would say, no, I want to have human intelligence confirm that. I need somebody on the ground. I need a spy on the ground who has eyes on contact with the threats, so that I can really know what's going on. Intelligence is a tough business. It's gotten tougher, but what you're after is the truth. That's what it's about.
Right.
And in order to gather the truth, you've got to be able to go at it from a number of different directions in order to be able to really have a concept that can be presented to the leadership so that we know how to respond. That's about our security. It's about our national security. You can't do it without good intelligence.
And you can't do it without heroes and patriots.
You got it.
Well,
Amen.
We'll leave it there. Secretary Panetta, thank you so much for joining us for this brief 20-so minutes. And as things develop at the Institute, or you want to make an announcement, please, yourself or anyone that you would like to join us, we would love to participate and promote anything that you're up to.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having this program.
Promote anything that you're up to.
All of your listeners.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, and good luck to everybody.
God bless you, Mr. Secretary.
God bless you.
So we've been talking with Secretary Leon Panetta for this first segment about national intelligence, foreign policy, and national security intelligence and foreign policy. We're going to take a quick break. It's 29 minutes past the hour. And just this quick reminder that We are in the station, I should say, is in its fund drive. We do want you to support this community radio station by making a pledge online, calling in, writing a check, and so forth. So I can't remember if we did the disclaimer at the top. Views and opinions expressed today are not necessarily those of the board, staff, members, underwriters, or volunteers at KMUD. Equal time will be made available for differing viewpoints. So we are going to move on to our second segment. It's 30 minutes past the hour. Again, we invite you as listeners to call in with your questions and comments. The number to call, 707-923-3911. We're going to continue our discussion on intelligence and national security with someone who was with us many, many years ago when we first began this program, John, back in 2017. We had the pleasure of speaking with Melvin Goodman, and he is joining us again today. Mr. Goodman is a national security intelligence expert who has worked as an analyst for the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, and the State Department. He taught at the National War College and Johns Hopkins University, and he is a senior fellow at the Center for International Policy. So we'd like to welcome back to the program these many years later, Melvin Goodman. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mary. Good to be with you.
It's good to have you. I know you were kind of listening into our previous conversations. Anything you want to react to before we talk specifically about where things are in intelligence and security?
Well, I would react to a couple things. One, I don't share Panetta's optimism in terms of where we're going as a society. It's incredible that the barriers that have been broken by Trump in his first and now his second term. He's taken on the major institutions of governance, whether it's higher education, whether it's scientific research, whether it's the media, whether it's law firms, communications networks, and he's done it rather successfully. We're starting to struggle back and trying to regain some of the territory that's been lost. But I think this is a tremendous setback to our democracy. So don't share his optimism. I also don't share his optimism about HUMINT. I worked with HUMINT when I was at the CIA for 25 years. There's good HUMINT and there's bad HUMINT. When you get signals intelligence and satellite intelligence, you're often seeing ground truth. Satellite photography is essential in terms of battlefield intelligence in terms of preparing to go to war, managing hostilities. You need signals intelligence, and you need the work of the code breakers. Like Panetta, I also went into the Army after high school and served as a code breaker, which is how I got into the whole world of CIA and intelligence. And one final thing about what John had to say about our youth. I'm not as pessimistic about our youth. I think the problem is they're telling us something we don't want to hear. We're not listening very hard. Some of them indeed are quite cynical, but the voting rates of people between the ages of 18 to 29 are going up. And if you look at the people who've been winning in primaries, there have been people who have been left of center and progressive. That's the message we're hearing. And I think conventional sources are not happy with the message. So I go back to the Vietnam War in the 1960s because at Indiana University I was involved in the teach-in movement. And the students and the educators were way out in front of the media, way out in front of the pundits, way out in front of the politicians in realizing how dishonorable that war was based on a lie like the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. So I think the youth are important. I think until they see more trust in government and actually more accountability, which Panetta could have worked harder on when he was at the CIA, when there was so much dispute over what the Inspector General was doing with regard to CIA malfunctioning, like torture and abuse, for example. And remember, he served a President, Barack Obama, who didn't want to look in the rearview mirror. He said he wanted to look ahead. He didn't want to look back. So we've never really coped with our own history, our own accountability, our own use of torture and abuse. And there's a lot that needs to be done to convince the youth and to convince people in both parties and independents that the government is there for the people. Right now, it hasn't been, and I think the people realize that.
John?
Mel, this is John. Welcome back to the show, by the way. And
Thanks, John.
I also heard you speak at the New York Public Library, I believe, some years ago as well, where I bought.
That was for my book, I think, National Insecurity.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk to you about that. In your book, Whistleblower at the CIA, you describe political and bureaucratic pressures within the intelligence community. Can you explain how those pressures affected your career and your willingness to speak out? And again, keep in mind, we've had people on our show like Edward Snowden, Tom Drake, Bill Binney, Kurt Wiebe. So you join a community of whistleblowers here at our show.
Yes, well, I was a whistleblower. I testified against Robert Gates in his nomination as CIA director in 1991. And the politicization that Bob Gates and Bill Casey were responsible for is what drove me out of the CIA. I left the CIA in 1986 to go to the National War College because intelligence was being politicized. And it was a very simple template that was taking place. Ronald Reagan wanted to increase defense spending, the greatest increase in defense spending in peacetime. He needed to justify it with a threat, with an enemy. And he convinced Bill Casey, not that Casey needed much convincing, nor did Bob Gates, that the Soviet Union was that threat. Well, there were several of us who were contrarians at the CIA at that time who were aware of the fact that the Soviet Union was in decline. Remember, this was the mid-1980s, and the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. The Berlin Wall came down in 1989. Warsaw Pact collapsed in 1990. But here's the CIA still publishing intelligence on the power of the Soviet Union and the power of the Soviet economy, and even the power of the East European economy, including East Germany. So that's when a good number of people left the Central Intelligence Agency because there was no willingness to tell truth to power. So if you fast forward to the George W. Bush administration, look at the deceit, look at the lies, look at the politicization of intelligence. There were no weapons of mass destruction. I called every journalist I knew in that period of time to tell them that I've talked to people in the intelligence community. These weapons of mass destruction don't exist. But still, George W. Bush waged a war on that false premise. So what you see over the years, and the intelligence community is partly responsible for this, is the exaggeration of the threat. I think we're seeing it today. Is China about to declare war on Taiwan? I don't think so, but that's all you read. Yeah. Is Russia going to go beyond Ukraine and attack a NATO country? I think that's really unlikely. It's taken the Russians more time to deal with Ukraine than it did to deal with Germany. So I think there's an exaggeration of the threat there as well.
Mel, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think the politicization and the falsification of intelligence amounts to treason. And I'll say that plainly. It amounts to treason. And treason is a capital offense. And what we've seen with the Gulf of Tonkin incident that got the United States involved in Vietnam with the loss of 56,000 Americans and between 2 and 3 million Vietnamese, the falsification of weapons of mass delusion in Iraq, Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden was in Pakistan the whole time. Why were we in Pakistan? What intelligence led us to Afghanistan for all those years? Yeah. The politicization and falsification of intelligence is unchecked. Please comment, Mel.
Yeah, well, I agree. If you look at the current situation, is Iran really an existential threat to Israel?
Right.
I've always argued that the existential threat to Israel is from its right wing, from its ultra-Orthodox. And we're seeing that now in the Netanyahu government and how it's going further and further to the right. And even if Netanyahu leaves the scene in October, he'll probably be replaced by someone who's further to the right than he is, whether it's Smotrich or Ben-Gvir. But we're exaggerating these threats, and now we've done that to the point where we're in a war, and this is what worries me, because now the wars are beginning to meld. The Russian-Ukrainian war seems to be melding with the U.S.-Iranian war, right. When you see attacks in the Caspian Sea by Ukrainians or attacks in an Egyptian port by Iranians. So that's why you need honest, objective intelligence. Now, the current CIA director, John Ratcliffe, has never had a reputation for allowing honest, objective intelligence to get out of the intelligence community itself. My favorite CIA director, talk about truth to power, who deserves tremendous credit, was William Burns, Bill Burns. So when you asked Leon Panetta about the qualities you're looking for, Bill Burns had all those qualities. Right. He was a State Department officer. He was an ambassador. He spoke several languages. He was honest. He was objective. He told truth to power. He understood the intricacies and the difficulties of the international community. So in the era that we're in now, where deterrence has failed and we don't know what to do, we see that we have a government without any expertise whatsoever. We're using two rich real estate brokers to conduct our diplomacy between Russia and Ukraine, U.S. and Israel, and U.S. and Iran. This is unbelievable to me. Yeah. The State Department has virtually disappeared as a bureaucracy. You have a Secretary of State who's also the National Security Advisor, and also the organizing head of the Agency for International Development, which never should have been demolished the way it was. Another defeat for our governance and our system of governance. So there's a lot to do. And when Trump finally leads the scene, and I assume he will leave the scene eventually, there's going to be a major job of repair and rehabilitation. And I hope we're up to it. A lot has been lost.
Yeah.
Mel, I'm glad you mentioned Bill Burns. If you look at my Facebook page, you'll see one of the photographs I profiled is me and Bill together when at Carnegie when he was at the Peace Institute, and he's one of my heroes because his expertise was in back channel diplomacy, and we hardly see that anymore. Everything is so overt. Let's send another wave of airstrikes in Iran. Let's send another wave of drones. It's everything is so overt, so violent, so out of proportion. Please explain to our listeners what back channel diplomacy is, some of its successes, and why it seems to have disappeared. Well,
it's disappeared because we've ruined the institutions that are responsible for it. We don't, as I say, we don't have a functioning State Department. We don't have a National Security Council that's functioning. We don't have any real experts on the Middle East that are part of Witkoff and Kushner's vaudeville act as they travel around the world to solve problems and pad their own fortunes.
Yep.
And what Bill Burns understood, in addition to what you said, and he's one of my heroes, is he understood the importance of multilateral diplomacy. This administration doesn't have a clue to the difficulty of multilateral diplomacy and how you conduct it. So when you look at the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which of course the Obama administration negotiated and the Trump administration, with the advice of John Bolton, who's on CNN on a regular basis, killed. And now we're trying to get back to what the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Iran nuclear accord, was all about. That was multilateral. Russia was involved. China was involved. All of the key European states. So before you can sit down to have these negotiations, and remember the negotiations took about 2 years from 2013 to 2015, but the back channel communication started, I think, 2011. So you had people like Bill Burns, you had people like Robert Malley, you had people like Secretary of Energy who was involved in these things. We don't have people of that level anymore. We don't have people of that kind of competence. It's really discouraging. So the big test will be, how do you rebuild these institutions when you've lost institutional memory? And my understanding from my experience at the CIA is when you lose institutional memory, it's very hard to rebound. And that's where we are now. And Trump has done tremendous damage to our government, to our governance. And I worry about war versus peace. And I tell people they should be reading Barbara Tuchman's Guns of August about World War I, when no one really wanted to go to war. We ended up in World War I. Well, if you look at what's happening now, I'm not saying we're on the verge of World War III, but I am worried. I am concerned because I think Putin is signaling he wants talks. Zelensky's in trouble politically. He certainly wants talks. Even Trump, in his own way, does not want to continue the massive escalation that he's responsible for. But you have someone out there who doesn't want peace, who doesn't want stability, who doesn't want continuity, and that's Benjamin Netanyahu. And the only country that has any influence over him, of course, is the United States. And we're not taking advantage of that. And if you look at the Russian-Ukrainian situation, the only country that can really sit down with Vladimir Putin and arrange some kind of compromise, because I think they are ready for it, but we're going to have to deal with the roots of this war, and we haven't done that, which is, of course, the expansion of NATO in 1990s. No one ever talks about that. But when Putin looks out now, he sees a NATO country on every part of his western border, plus a Ukraine that's virtually a NATO member because they're being aided by just about every NATO country. And until we resolve that problem, we're never going to have a negotiable situation with the Russians. And we need to get back there. That takes diplomacy. That takes negotiation. That needs back-channel diplomacy, as you say. But back-channel diplomacy is done by experts, and it's done secretly. Right. A lot of people have problems with Henry Kissinger. I know I do. But when you look how he prepared the summit meeting for Nixon in Beijing in 1972, that was all back-channel. There were very few people who knew about that in his own department or even at the highest levels of the CIA. So when you say why we were involved in Pakistan, well, Pakistan was helping us with the back-channel diplomacy, just as there are a lot of countries that help us in terms of intelligence exchanges. So it's a very difficult environment. And one last word about human. For human intelligence to work successfully, you have to have diversity in your among your agent corps, among your operatives. Look what this government is doing to diversity, people of color, women. The one great advantage the United States has is our diversity. Right. It's our people of color. Why do we take advantage of it? So it's very concerning to me.
Right. I couldn't agree more. Diversity is a key component of human intelligence, and Trump seems to have purged both the intelligence community and also the military. It seems like the poster boy for both is the Christian nationalist, right. And someone who is a yes man.
Well, it's terrifying to put someone like Hegseth, who was not even a primetime anchor, he was a weekend anchor, as Secretary of Defense in probably the second most important position in the Washington government after the president himself, is just criminal. And what Hegseth has done in terms of purging the military, purging women, purging people of color, calling for tests for testosterone. Yeah. He should go. I took some grandchildren to see Odyssey the other day. Maybe people in the government ought to take a look at Odyssey and see the dangers of war and the dangers of violence, and learn something. But this is not a government that is interested in reading or in learning. You have a president who has no knowledge of history whatsoever. Hegseth is totally out of control. Rubio is holding down 4 administrative positions, and all of his institutions that he's responsible for are crumbling under his leadership. And we don't use outside expertise. When Ronald Reagan prepared for summits with Gorbachev, and he conducted several of them, he brought in outside experts. He used CIA analysts and State Department analysts, but he brought in outside academics. I don't know any outside academics who come into the White House these days. I don't know who Trump talks to. And we all know that the last person who speaks to him has the most influence. And if you've read Hillenbrand's book, Regime Change, about the February the 11th meeting in the Situation Room, where Netanyahu came up with his wild idea about escalating in Iran, changing the regime, and coming in with force, you realize that made no sense whatsoever. I think John Ratcliffe did try to tell him that, and Rubio, in his own way, thought what Netanyahu was offering was a bunch of crap. But here we went to war with Israel. Even the George Bushes, H.W. Bush and W. Bush, when they went to war against Iraq in 1991 and then again in 2003, we paid Israel to stay out of the war. you don't want to go to war with Israel because then you lose control. So now you have a Zionist doctrine that's looking more like colonialism to me than anything else. Bombing in Lebanon, seizing territory in southern Syria, displacing people in the West Bank that looks like the Nakba from 1948. And what they've done to Gaza is simply genocidal. It's very sad.
It is 50 minutes past the hour. You're listening to Heroes and Patriots. John and I are speaking with Mel Goodman. He is a national security and intelligence expert. He worked as an analyst for the Central Intelligence Agency and the State Department. He taught at the National War College and Johns Hopkins University, and he's a senior fellow at the Center for International Policy. We will take your questions. We have a few minutes left for that. If you'd like to call in, 707-923-3911. We are talking about the current state of the CIA, and other national intelligence issues. I wondered if you would speak on the appointment of Jay Clayton for the National Intelligence Agency. He seems to not have any experience. How do you think that's going to work out?
Well, it won't work out well. He has no background in intelligence whatsoever. I don't think he's going to be one of those people who will tell truth to power. That's an overused expression, particularly these days when there's so little of it. But, you could also question whether we ever should have created a national intelligence organization in the first place. Remember, with 9/11, we overreacted, I think, terribly, which is what President Biden tried to tell Netanyahu after the attack in Israel in 2023. Don't overreact, that we did after 9/11, and we made mistakes. Well, two of the mistakes that we made were creating a Department of National Intelligence and the Department of Homeland Security, for that matter. These were overreactions. But Clayton, I think, is not going to be the person who's going to connect the various institutions of the intelligence community. There are now 17 or 18 of these institutions. We throw far too much money at all of them. We've got a military budget that's approaching over $1 trillion. That's more than the rest of the world spends on the military. And we spend about $70 billion on intelligence, which is more than the rest of the world spends on intelligence. And you have to ask, what do we get for that kind of money? So we throw in money at problems, and we rely too much on military force. And this is where China, to me, the big winner of our war with U.S.-Iran is China on several fronts, has been much smarter with the Belt and Road Initiative in Africa and the Global South and South America. They've been very successful, whereas all we do is throw military formations into the mix. And now we're even talking about a task force for Cuba. It's in the New York Times this morning. Has anyone looked at the history of the Bay of Pigs lately, where we had a task force that started in the last year of the Eisenhower administration? That didn't end very well. So there's no knowledge of history anymore. That's
Mel, we've got questions coming in through the email here. Again, these are from members of Congress, members of the military, and members of the intelligence community that can't ask questions for attribution because they're not retired; they're active duty. But they can ask questions through me anonymously. I know who these people are, but this is a very senior member of Congress who's wondering, and I quote, given Mel's comments on institutional history and institutional knowledge, of which he is a key part, have Mel give an informed analysis of the current political tensions, such as the Ukraine conflict and the U.S.-Iran relationship, and keep in mind, whatever he says, I will be passing along to my committee.
Well, the number one point I would make is that the key to solving both of these problems is negotiation. It's not throwing more military into the problem. We've escalated enough. Putin has escalated enough. And the key to negotiation is to getting the U.S. involved and getting the U.S. involved with partners. But that's the challenge of multilateral diplomacy that I talked about, that this government does not know how to conduct. We're getting important signaling now, certainly from Zelensky, from Putin, from Iran. Iran's been very careful with the targets that they've hit. They're not trying to hit Israel. They're not trying to hit the United States formations right now. They're going after Arab countries in the Gulf that have cooperated with the United States, but they're being very careful. So I think they do want to negotiate their way out of this, but they have an idea of what their objectives are, and I don't think we have a clue. And frankly, it goes back to Obama when he announced in 2011 the pivot, that we were going to get out of the Middle East and go into the Indo-Pacific. Well, that told China that we were going to practice containment, which was the wrong signal to send to China, because we should never cut off negotiations with China. They're the key to all of the major problems we need to resolve: climate, the environment, international health issues. So there's a lot of work to be done on that front, but it requires expertise, negotiation, diplomacy, and consultation. And when you get to disarmament, because here are the major nuclear powers all modernizing their nuclear forces. Nuclear weapons have no utility whatsoever unless you want to blow up the whole damn place.
Right.
And we better understand that. And the last arms agreement we had was allowed to just languish, which did limit warheads to 1,550 in both the Russian and U.S. inventories. We've got to get back to arms control and diplomacy. Bill Burns knew how to do that.
Yep.
Right. We've got about 2 minutes.
I've got another
left,
question.
Ron.
I've got another question here from a senior member of Congress. Your work attracts a lot of interest, Mel. I don't know how long you've been retired, but you're still current.
I'm not retired.
Your guest is
He's still teaching.
okay.
At your alma mater, mine, Johns Hopkins.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to be part of the SAKOWICZ community. No question about it. Your guest has written about phantom defense, in quote, phantom defense, first about the Star Wars program, and now we have hundreds of billions being spent on AI and other technology. How does your guest assess the long-term impact of such large-scale defense spending on technology as with regard to national security and public trust?
Well, my basic problem is technology outruns policy. Technology outruns all of the political ideas we had to deal with the technology, and we've got to come to grips with, particularly in terms of artificial intelligence, the idea of autonomous weapons, that the weapons themselves will make decisions about the targets. And we're throwing, I think the last time I looked at the budget appropriation, over $50 billion into autonomous defensive weapon systems.
Wow.
So it's important that the United States, China, and Russia sit down and hold very serious talks about confidence building measures to put limits on this technology, because to me, it's really moving out of control.
We have about a minute to go. We do have one caller. Caller, if you're listening, make a quick question to our guest, Mel Goodman.
Oh, okay. Yes. Very good conversation. I just wanted to add to the mix that there's global warming going on more and more every year. So this year's the hottest year in the history of recording global temperature. So it's quite possible that there could be runaway global warming on the planet mixed in with everything else that you're talking about. So we can factor that in as well. And that would be a huge major emergency planetarily. Okay, thank you.
Well, let me just add one thought there. Before Trump came into power and messed up all the so-called objectives of the Pentagon's major enemy was global warming and the environment. And that was the greatest threat to the United States. We're not going to solve that problem without negotiations with China. They're way ahead of us on the environment, on everything to do with electric vehicles, solar panels, solar cells. They're leading the international community in that regard, and we're falling behind. And meanwhile, Trump wants to build his battleships. When we learned from World War II, about 70 years ago, that the battleship was over and the era of the aircraft carrier is over. So we better catch up.
We are out of time. I hear the outro music going. Mel Goodman, thank you so much for being our guest for the second segment. We want to have you back as things develop and hear your forecasts. And thank you again for being our guest today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Thank you, Mel. Good to see you again.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, John.
You bet. That is our program today.